Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Just 3 hours from now, President Trump will formally announce his pick for the Supreme Court. The new justice will replace retiring Anthony Kennedy, who was the swing vote on so many issues. This will be President Trump's second pick in just 18 months. Let's bring in out of D.C. Janae Norman with the very latest.
This will be President Trump's second Supreme Court appointment and a crucial one that could replace Justice Anthony Kennedy's swing vote with a much more conservative opinion. President Trump producing prime-time television, the much-anticipated announcement of who he'll pick to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy. In true reality TV fashion, teasing ahead on Twitter, writing, "I have long heard that the most important decision a U.S. president can make is the selection of a Supreme Court justice. Will be announced tonight at 9:00 p.m.
We're very close to making a decision."
His short list whittled down from a list of 25 potential picks, believed to be Raymond Kethledge, Thomas Hardiman, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh.
These individuals, of course, who are in the pool of prospective nominees have come from different academic and professional backgrounds. But I have no doubt the selection will be a good one.
President Trump previously pledging to supporters to appoint pro-life judges. His next nominee could be a swing vote to overturn cases like Roe v. Wade that legalized abortion.
Justice Anthony Kennedy was the fifth vote to uphold Roe versus Wade. And if he's replaced by a significantly more conservative justice, we may see the end of constitutional protections for abortion in this country.
Senate Republicans with a one-seat majority holding the power to approve any nominee the president picks. Democrats wanting the vote held off until after midterm elections when they're hoping to regain control.
These justices that have made the final cut are extreme on women's reproductive rights, they're extreme on voting rights, but they are also very extreme on gun rights.
And the fight to defeat the president's pick will start just minutes after tonight's announcement. Already 2 Democratic senators have plans to join progressive groups for rallies here outside the Supreme Court. Reporting live from the Supreme Court, Janae Norman, ABC News. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Janae. Let's bring in Emily Gold-Waldman. She's a professor of constitutional law at Pace University. And this really doesn't need a lot of hyperbole. You can't overstate the significance of the introduction that we're going to hear tonight, right?
I agree. I mean, it's always a very big thing when a new Supreme Court justice is announced, but especially the replacement for Kennedy, who had been the swing voter on so many issues. I think the stakes really don't get higher than that.
No, and the way a lot of folks have said it to me over the years, Emily, is if it's a conservative replacing a conservative or progressive replacing a progressive, the faces change, but the numbers don't. In this one, because it was such a 5-4 court so often, and while Kennedy, other than some social issues, hewed to the right on many of the key decisions, nonetheless, maybe Chief Justice Roberts becomes a swing all over again if this nominee that we'll learn this evening gets confirmed. But that's how much of a difference this thing could make.
Exactly. And I think that is what will happen. I think probably Justice Roberts will become the swing voter because he occasionally does swing. We saw that most with Obamacare, but he does not do that very much. So you're really seeing just a shift. I mean, if you think about it, before Kennedy, the swing voter was O'Connor. So then O'Connor got replaced by someone much further to the right, Alito. So Kennedy became the new swing voter. Now Kennedy is going to get replaced probably by someone much further. So Roberts becomes the swing voter, and it keeps just shifting the balance.
I want to talk about the names that are floated. You see there on your screen. Listen, usually nobody can keep a secret in Washington. Was widely rumored the president didn't even make his final choice till later this afternoon. Of those 4 names, all pretty well qualified in terms of bona fides, but there isn't a mystery that of these 4, all of them are considered and supported by the Federalist Society. They're all considered certainly conservative in both opinions and also some of the commentary that they've given over the years. There won't be a suitor surprise here, right?
I think it's unlikely that there will be a suitor surprise. I think there would be variations between them, but it's hard to even tell exactly what those would be, in part because all of them right now are circuit court judges. And while you can get somewhat of a sense of what they would do, it's different when you're on the Supreme Court, because now you're not bound to just follow precedent in the same way. You can be part of changing that precedent.
Now, in terms of a litmus test, which is what some critics of the four names that have been most prominently mentioned have said, they say you don't have to divine the intent of President Trump here for what kind of a justice he wants. Just want to remind everybody what President Trump said when he was then candidate Trump, and then we'll get to some of the cases or some of the key issues that could be decided. This again, President Trump when he was a candidate on the trail.
I am pro-life, and I will be appointing pro-life judges.
America has a pro-life president, a pro-life vice president, a pro-life House of Representatives, and 25 pro-life Republican state capitals. That is pretty good.
Okay, so again here, he wants a pro-life judge. Now, how does it realistically work? I know that Gorsuch said, hey, I'd walk out if he asked me the question and all the rest, and maybe it's not even with this president and his capacity to say the first thing that comes to his mind in a private audience with anyone. Do they know?
I don't think he can know for 100%. I mean, one of the possibilities, Amy Coney Barrett, in some of her writing when she was still a professor, she said some things that were negative about abortion. I read one article she wrote where she referred to it as, you know, taking an innocent life, and she talked about the unborn victims. I mean, I think it's very clear.
And she also invoked her faith in that conversation and says that her highest power, or the person that she looked for the ultimate guidance in this, wasn't the law, but it was God.
Right, and actually in that article, what she was saying was that in certain cases it might be appropriate for a Catholic judge to, in fact, recuse himself or herself rather than to be part of enforcing the death penalty. So she wasn't saying you would issue a decision that was against the law. She said you might have to recuse yourself. It was an academic article, but anyway, you could certainly tell what she thought about abortion. Now, she didn't say specifically, and if I ever ended up on the Supreme Court, I would vote to reverse Roe versus Wade. But I think she most clearly was on record as pro-life. With the other justices too, I think that's probably true. He doesn't say to them, are you pro-life? Are you going to vote to overturn Roe versus Wade? You can get a sense, though, in terms of how they generally approach the Constitution, right? So to the extent that they say, and you can tell in their other writings, I'm an originalist. I don't believe in sort of inferring additional fundamental rights beyond what's literally in the text of the Constitution. Well, abortion is not in the text of the Constitution.
But then they also have to describe whether they view themselves as activists or if they view something as settled law so they wouldn't take an opportunity to reinterpret. Now, I want to remind our audience, it's not just future of Roe v. Wade here that could be reassessed by this court. Take a look at the other issues here, the Supreme Court, if they chose, and there's certainly cases that are in the docket, if you will, that they could choose. Take a look at some of the issues. I mentioned abortion, same-sex marriage, obviously Kennedy being the swing vote there with his absence. One judge votes differently. Obviously, that goes away. The future of Obamacare potentially, gay rights overall here, the role of dark money, if you will, and also limits or not for corporation donations or just basically Citizens United writ large. Voting rights, how political maps are drawn, gerrymandering, and even privacy and the interpretation of the 14th Amendment, it seems to me, no matter who is on the bench, is going to have to be figured out in this digital age here. But I just gave a short list.
And
My
I want to add
God,
another one.
sure.
Affirmative action.
That's right.
Is another one where Kennedy had been the fifth vote. And so that's one that I think is really potentially going to be revisited with Kennedy's replacement. On some of those issues, Kennedy already leaned conservative. So he was the one who wrote Citizens United.
Yep.
So his replacement, I don't know that that changes any. That sort of just keeps the status quo. But affirmative action, I think you could definitely see some changes. Abortion, as we discussed, even if Roe versus Wade doesn't get absolutely overturned immediately, there's so many different ways it can be chipped away at.
You can basically have states in this country, swaths of you think there's only one provider right now, they shut it down entirely here. You could have half the country that a person couldn't get a legal procedure because it becomes states' rights.
It's possible, right? So if they strike down Roe versus Wade altogether, they say it's not a constitutional right, it's up to the states. You could see that, even if they don't. So right now the standard is, well, is the restriction an undue burden? Suppose they start saying that almost nothing is an undue burden. Remember the law in Texas that said you had to have all these facilities if you were going to perform abortions. As a result of that law, a lot of abortion clinics in Texas were closing. The Supreme Court, with Kennedy, there were 5 votes to say that is an undue burden. If you have 5 votes the other way, then you can sort of chip away at it incrementally by just saying nothing's really an undue burden anymore.
Couple of the quick ones, or maybe not so quick. When the hearings begin, a lot of times, to the frustration, I think, of our audience, and myself included, you'll see senators pontificate and use their 5 minutes talking about what they think makes this person terrific or unfit. Specific questions you'd like to see posed, regardless of the lawmaker, to try to get to, at the heart of it, what this justice believes or not. I would think the 14th Amendment would be defining the limits, at least in the viewpoint of the candidate. But give me other ideas. If they say Roe v. Wade, you probably won't get the answer, but what would be a way to more tailor that
You might
question?
want to ask them what their view is towards stare decisis, the idea of letting decisions stand. So in what cases would they be willing to reject the idea of stare decisis and revisit the holding? They're not going to name specific cases, but you could say, what would be the standards in which case you thought it was appropriate to move away from stare decisis?
And
that's a way to sort of tell, because then you can sort of glean, you know, are they going to lean towards saying Roe and then Casey are settled law? To the extent that they're very willing to say, well, everything
I'll
is
get
up
into
on
the
the table.
politics of it, but what Emily's also touching on is it's not enough to just say I can't answer that question. You have to give an idea as to your legal viewpoint and how you would approach these things here.
What's your approach to interpreting the Constitution?
And there's a couple of Republican senators who, if they get no answers, would have a tough time justifying yes with their concerns over Roe. Okay, finally, is it possible, obviously, a lot of times when you're on with us, we're talking about the ongoing Mueller probe here. Is it possible that senators could get assurances from this justice that he or she would recuse themselves if confirmed, if any part of the Mueller probe went before the Supreme Court?
I think that's unlikely that they are going to agree up front to do that. I think they'll say it would depend or something like that. I don't think they're going to agree to anything ahead of time. I think they would have to see what's happening. And Supreme Court justices do not have to recuse themselves. The normal recusal rules for federal judges don't apply to Supreme Court justices. They're supposed to decide on their own whether or not to recuse.
The optics of it. Do you imagine if there was a 5-4 decision in the 5th vote in support, let's say, of President Trump, if it went before the Supreme Court, was the person who's confirmed right now with the Mueller probe? I mean,
right. No, it's true. And I mean, Gorsuch is already on the court, and he was also appointed by Trump. I would be stunned if one of them agreed right now that they would recuse themselves.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Emily. Appreciate it. All right, quick programming note. 9 p.m. I will be live with complete coverage along with the 501 News team for the president's announcement. As we speak right now, we still don't know who that will be. When we come back, I'll bring in our panel with more on the Supreme Court and the politics of it. President Trump is making this look like a reality show for all intents and purposes tonight. Not only the way things are done, but in this White House, well, everything is the new normal. We'll take a look at that and more.